Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mother Knows Death. This is our special Christmas edition. So let's get into the first story.
Well, since this is an X-rated show, to quote Pop-Up, it only makes sense to start with the penis story. So
Which really isn't even a Christmas story, but the deformity has to do with Christmas. So we're just going to go with it.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so this 43-year-old guy went to the doctor and he said that he noticed a decrease in his penis length, but an increase in his girth.
So this can be caused by a condition called Peyronie's disease. Have you ever heard of it?
No.
So it's just scarring inside of the penis, which could happen if you have a lot of rough sex. It could happen in other ways too, but that's one of the common ways that it happens. And what happens is it could kink off the blood supply. And in this case, it caused venous insufficiency. So that means that the blood from the penis during erection that was going back to the heart was kind of backing up into the penis. And it was causing his penis to, like Maria said, it looked like it was shorter in length and wider. And it's called a Christmas tree deformity because the penis actually looks like the shape of a Christmas tree. The
And I
pictures
guess
of it, when you see the pictures of it, you'll say, "Oh, okay, this is why it's called that."
Yeah, this post is called Christmas in June in the gross room. I mean, you definitely, I think
Well,
just under
I wrote the article in June. That's why I called it that.
I think just, talking about it, you can't really have like a full visual of exactly what this looks like, but I do think it's a really accurate description based on the pictures you included.
I also show photos of the surgical repair of it, which is it's pretty intense. Thinking like, especially if a guy looks at this surgery, they're going to be like, "Oh my God, that looks insane." They basically cut a circumferential incision around his previous circumcision from when he was a kid. They cut a circle around his penis, and they slid the skin down. They basically like degloved the penis, slid it down, and then they were able to squeeze the skin over and just kind of cinch it and make it look more normal. And he was able to have better sex and just enjoy his life more. And he was happy with the cosmetic results a few months later.
Well, it's good, I guess, that you could at least get surgery and fix this so you just don't have to. I mean, cosmetically, you want to be okay with the way you look, but I'm sure it was painful at some point too.
Yeah,
So,
it was painful. And also for his partner, it was probably really painful because it did get super thick. You know what I mean? Like that could cause pain for some people. So yeah.
all right, this next one couldn't be more amazingly timed news wise. This is a recent story, believe it or not. So, last week in Massachusetts, police had gone to this house to execute a search warrant. I'm going to say based later on the charges that it was drug related. So, when they get to this house, there's these two males there. They're freaking out. They decide they need to escape through the roof. So, they get up on the roof. One of the men was able to jump off and land on a parked car, but the other guy was seemingly really inspired by, the time of year and thought it would be great to jump down the chimney and try to get out the other way there, just like Santa.
Yeah, and then what happened though is terrifying. For me, it's terrifying when I just look at the pictures. It's this guy inside of a chimney. It looks like it's at least 20 feet down. There's absolutely no way he could get out by himself, and it's just bricks encasing his shoulders and everything. He could barely probably turn around if he even can. And you could just see like the cops looking down at him in this chimney.
So he obviously gets like stuck, right? And then the cops he's running away from have to end up rescuing him out of this chimney. What are you doing?
Listen, you're not going to believe this. I don't know if I ever told you this story, but I have a similar story that happened in our childhood to this.
Oh my God.
So, I don't know if I ever told you this. So, when my dad was building the addition on our house, I was a young teenager, and my brother was maybe 5 or something years old. He was pretty little. And we helped my dad build the addition. So I remember being on a ladder and just holding up the drywall while my dad would nail it in and things like that. Well, my brother also helped, but he was way younger than me, and he was walking in this one part of the house and he fell through the ceiling, which was only we had a case of this a few months ago that some some person fell through the ceiling of a house, like through the attic, you know, because
Yeah.
if you have the rafters that are just the wood and you just put a piece of drywall to cover it to make the ceiling, there's nothing to protect you. You'll fall right through it. Like let me give you a better example. Like in Christmas Vacation, when he goes up in the attic and puts the presents up there and then he falls through and he ends up standing on the kid's bunk bed.
Yeah, I know
Like,
exactly what
okay.
you're talking about.
So Louis was holding a hammer and he fell through drywall like that into a space where my dad like encased the chimney, the top of the chimney where he was building the addition. And he fell like an entire story in between the chimney and the wall in a space like that skinny. And of course, I don't know why mom's perspective of what this happened, but my dad was probably like, oh shit, I'm going to get in a lot of trouble from my wife because of this. So he grabbed me. I can't even believe I'm saying this out loud because this is so outrageous. He grabbed me and like lowered me down to grab Louis and then pulled us both back up. Like we never had to call 911. No one had to come rescue us. But like not only did the 5-year-old have a hammer and fell a story down that spot, but then on top of that, he lowered me as a young kid too down to get him.
Wait, so did he lower you down by your feet so you
Yes.
were like head down?
Yes.
So there was the potential you could have fallen too and gotten seriously injured
Yes.
falling on your head.
Yes. It's so outrageous. It's like unbelievable. And I remember, I mean, I guess somebody told them because she knows about it now, but I don't know if she was home, if she wasn't home when it happened, like whatever happened. It just, shit was just different in the 80s. I'll just tell you that right now.
I have heard the story of Louis falling, but I don't think I realized that you were the one to scoop him out.
Who else would have did it? Like, it just was...
The way it was presented to me was it wasn't that bad, and they were just able to get him out pretty quickly.
No, because like Pop couldn't reach him. You know what I mean?
This is such a typical 80s dad move.
Yeah,
if you've
it really
ever heard
is.
one.
Yeah, and there's like thousands of stories of us being in just similar kind of danger at all times. You know, just
so nobody got hurt at the end of the day. It was all fine.
No, I mean, maybe the only reason Mom found out is because we told her. Like, I don't know if he actually did or whatever. We'll have to ask them the story. But
it's really classic Lou Qualtieri, if you ask me.
but yeah, so this photo reminded me of Louis like standing, like being inside of you guys have to look at the article of my little brother just standing like inside of the chimney like that. Like it just was funny.
Well, at least Louis was 5 and like skinny and able to get out really easy, not a full-grown man.
Yeah, no, Louis was like probably at that age, he was probably like 40 pounds or something. He was like a skinny, like, you know, a skinny little thing. So, but yeah, with this guy, I guess it's just funny because if you're running from the cops, you're just going to try to go anywhere to not get caught. But like, you have to think that would be just like a terrible idea. And they did bring him to the hospital because, you know, he fell 20 feet encased in bricks, so he could have hurt himself. But I don't think he ended up getting that hurt, and now he got arrested, right?
Well, I don't want to say for sure that drugs were involved, but that is what he got charged with. Possession of Class A drugs, possession of Class B drugs. They said he also had a slew of charges from outstanding warrants. So
was he on all of the drugs?
I'm going to say possibly. And then the other guy did end up getting caught later. But I'm sure they were like, cool, we just wanted to, you know, search this house for drugs. And now we have to rescue this complete idiot out of the chimney.
Yeah.
So I wonder just how that all went down. I'm sure the cops were just like, just another day at work. All right, before we get into this next story, can we talk about the history of Santa Claus for a minute? I always thought that he originated from like Germany or something. And I think I feel that way because I watched that animation last night, Santa Claus is Coming to Town, and they make it very German.
Yeah, I never really thought about it. I feel like at some point I learned about it in school, but I don't really remember. So enlighten us.
Okay, so apparently St. Nicholas was a bishop in Turkey over 1600 years ago. I never would have guessed the origin was from Turkey, just based on all these classic tales and everything. So he was said to have inherited money from his family, which he took and turned into this ultra generous figure. So Basically, he died in the year 343 CE or AD as we knew it for a while. Originally, his bones were thought to be buried in Venice, but in the 50s, I guess they found these bones and they were able to determine that all of the bones together were from the same person, but they couldn't confirm at the time if they actually did belong to St. Nicholas. So, anyway, archaeologists have now discovered this sarcophagus that they think actually belongs to St. Nicholas, and it makes sense because it's at the St. Nicholas Church in Turkey.
Yeah, and I guess he was moved there 200 years after he died, right? So that's why they think that it's definitely that goes along with the story that's been being told that he was moved from his original place of death and to this church. So
Yeah,
I
so
think it's so cool if it turns out to be, I don't know, because like even if they were able to do any kind of DNA on it, which I doubt, it's just so old, you know. I don't know how they would be able to determine that it was really him just because it was such a long time ago, you know?
well, I guess they'll have anthropologists looking at the age of the bones and stuff, right? And if they could date it back to that time, they might be able to make an assumption, but
Yeah.
I don't know how they'd know. But I at first was like, isn't it obvious that his remains would be at the church built in his honor? But I guess it seems like the sarcophagus was like hidden within the walls. Did you get
Yeah.
that impression
Yeah,
too?
it looks like it was hidden, but it looked, you know, it's the same thing when they excavate people in Egypt, right? It's like you can tell if they were of some importance by the way that they were buried. And it's just like this isn't just like some rando that's buried there. You know what I mean? Like this person had significance in the presentation of the way that they were buried.
This reminded me of that scene from National Treasure when they go under the church in Philly and they break through the grave site and then they find all the treasure hidden at the end of it. It was just like the pictures of this just reminded me of that for some reason. But
That movie is like I love that movie, but it's also so terrible.
do you know Other Maria was an extra in that
Yeah, I
movie?
know. It makes me so happy actually, but it's just it's one of those movies that it's like The Mummy, right? They're just like really cringy and kind of terrible, but also the best movie ever, you know?
Yeah, I agree with that. Just it has really corny one-liners, but it is cool in concept. And I don't know, anything Nicolas Cage is in is just kind of cringe anymore. But
He's in Moonstruck, which is the best movie ever.
well, that's in our opinion the best movie he was ever in, right? But I don't know. I think this is super cool. I'm surprised it took them this long to look there. Were they hired to do this because they thought it, or I don't really know.
I don't know. I just think it's super cool that it happened right before Christmas, so
Yeah, they said it excites them greatly. I guess they're gonna get we're showing pictures of them still taking it out of the wall. I guess they're gonna get the rest of it out and try to conduct studies and try to see if they can figure out if it's the real St. Nicholas or not. But it's certainly an interesting
So wait,
discovery.
they found the sarcophagus, but they didn't open it yet?
Well, I don't think they fully got it out.
Oh,
Or
okay.
maybe by the time we're recording this, they did, but the news article only had pictures of it
Oh,
partially.
okay.
So I don't know. I'm also, part of me thinks it's cool to find these artifacts and research them and everything too, but I'm like, the purpose of him being buried there was so he could lay peacefully in this building that was dedicated to him. So why are we disturbing his grave?
They're respectful of that sometimes. They have all these different imaging tools and things that they can bring there, and they've recently found a lot of mummies, you know, and they won't cut them up and stuff like they used to. But just because they're able to do imaging that's so much more specific than it used to be, you know, and people are starting to say like, "Hey, we should respect the remains instead of being like you know." But back in the day it was like we found a trophy, like you know, if they weren't robbed and you found it intact, it was like insane, you know.
I actually feel like this could be an awesome movie. So let's say you write this script and it's like these archaeologists are digging up and they think they found Santa and they take him out and everything and then his magic reinstates and comes to life. So then all these adults that stop believing in Santa have to believe like in the Santa Claus movie with Tim Allen.
Wow. This is almost as good as the romance novel you guys wrote for me.
Oh my God, we have to tell everybody this. So We were trying to figure out what to get our friend Jen, and I was like, "Oh,
Well,
at
Jen,
Lucia's."
let's specify. So last night we had our I Heart Autopsy Christmas party for our
Yes.
business, which consists of me, Maria, and Jen,
Yeah.
our 3 employees.
So every year we go to the melting pot and we have fondue and we just talk about, just gossip and do things girlies do at dinner. So we were trying to think of a present to get Jen, and I said, at Lucia's birthday party, her and I talked about reading romance books and watching Hallmark movies for like 2 hours. So
Which I initially was like, no, she didn't. She doesn't like that stuff.
she didn't believe me at all. So coincidentally, this romance bookstore just opened in a town near us, and I have gone there a couple of times, and I love it, and I think it's the cutest little store ever. So I said, let's go to the bookstore and get Jen there doing like these mystery boxes. So we go, and you were the most uncomfortable I've ever seen you in your entire life.
It was the weirdest place I've ever been in my life. It was a porn. It's like a porn.
It is not a porn store. It looks like a normal
No.
bookstore, but it's just romance books.
Yeah, and
And
what
they're not
happens
all-
in those books?
They don't all have sex in them. Some of them are really innocent, like Pride and Prejudice, and then some of them have really graphic sex.
So the lady that's working in there was trying to explain to another customer all the different sections, which the sections were hilarious. The one was men with hot jobs. I sent it to Gabe. I was like, oh, I wonder if there's a book about you here. But they had all these different like paranormal and like mob bosses and office and sports and all these different categories. And this woman was explaining to one of the customers there. She's like, are you into paranormal stuff? There's like kraken and tentacles and stuff. And I was like, what the fuck is happening in this
You're
store?
sitting there judging everybody for reading these books, but I'm telling you, you're the unusual one, because I could guarantee most of our listeners, who are a majority of women, also read romance books.
They like
and
reading
watch
books
Hallmark
about
movies.
getting penetrated with octopus tentacles.
Listen, that's not my thing in particular, but like they have a section for everybody there. Anyway, we're telling Jen this story last night. We got her a mystery box about a female lead that had amnesia.
Yeah, really. Like this is what the box said. It's like female lead with amnesia.
Whatever.
You're just, like, I'm sorry, it's
you're a
weird.
hater of the culture. It's not weird. Every millennial is reading romance books right now.
Why? Because
Anyway.
you guys just jump on. So last year it was like pickleball is this new thing. We all play.
Pickleball is still a thing, and
Yeah.
pickleball's been around forever.
Yeah,
it
but
just got hot last year.
you hipsters only just got onto it last year, and now it's like romance novel. Like, let me tell you something. My mother used to read romance novels in the 80s with like Fabio on it and shit. Like this is not new at all. But you guys just jump on these trends, and you all do the same thing.
Nobody at all is saying it's new. What happened was a couple authors a couple years ago like remarketed it. So they took those embarrassing covers of Fabio away. They made them cute. And then everybody is like, oh, I don't have to be embarrassed reading this in public anymore.
Was a sex symbol. That's why he was on the cover of the books.
Yeah, but they're
What's
embarrassing to read.
They're literally the same. I bet you if you read one, you'd be like, oh, this is so good.
You're not even listening to me. They could be the same content, but the covers are different, so people are more willing to take them out in public. Furthermore, with Kindles being invented, you could read books and people don't know what you're reading. Anyway, you're just not going to win this argument. Get the stick out of your butt. It's fine. People like reading books that are mindless and don't have conflict. Anyway, we're telling Jen this whole story last night, and then she this morning sent us a story. She wrote on ChatGPT or something about you and Gabe's love story, and we were pissing our pants laughing.
You guys are such dorks.
Whatever.
Okay.
You could keep being a hater, but nobody's going to be on your side.
Oh, no. There's definitely somebody that's on my side. For sure. That shit is weird.
This episode is brought to you by The Gross Room.
Guys, if you are looking for a last-minute gift, you can give the gift of the Gross Room because it is going to be on sale for just a few days right before Christmas, and it starts on Sunday.
So yeah, the sale starts this Sunday, the 22nd, and it's going to end on the 26th, the day after Christmas. So if you get some cash or gift cards, it'll be a perfect gift to yourself or great for a last-minute gift because you could just buy it. send it off right away, and everybody will love it.
Yeah, and it's only $20 for an entire year, and you get thousands of articles, videos, photos, and just interaction with all the members. And it's just, if you like this podcast, you're just going to love being in the grocery room.
Yeah, so head over to thegrossroom.com on Sunday to sign up or give the gift of gross. All right, let's talk about some toy injuries now.
All right, so we talked about a couple over the past couple of weeks. We talked about the atomic lab that was marketed in the 1950s that was for sale that ended up selling at auction for $16,500.
It's so crazy that somebody would spend that much money on that.
Well, yeah, because it's the only time that you could buy radioactive material. It's not that easy to come by. So that kit actually in the 1950s sold for $49.50, which is a shit ton of money for back then.
Yeah.
If you think about that, it's equivalent to $650 of today's money. So that's a lot for a toy. And that is they say that's part of the reason why the sales weren't good. But I think the real reason is because you were exposing people to uranium and radiation. And that's just, we knew that wasn't good at the time. But we also talked about daycare workers getting charged because kids ingested water beads.
Yeah, we talk about water beads a lot, definitely in the grocery room, but I think we've had a couple stories on here, right?
Yeah, so we do have a post in the grocery room, a couple of posts in the grocery room, but if you go to this specific one that's on the toy injuries, you could see the photos as well of how big these little tiny plastic beads kind of engorge within a child's bowel and cause an obstruction and leads to surgery, could lead to perforation and even death in some cases, which is terrible. Some of the other toys that we talk about in this article are the slip and slide. That was one of my favorites when I was a kid.
We had one when I was little and I liked it, but I feel like it hurt.
It does hurt. And the thing is, when you think about slip and slides, you think that, for me, when I first started learning about why they're so bad, I thought it would be due to lacerations, because the one that I had was with when I was a kid had these like metal hooks that that's how you anchored it into the grass. And I remember going on it and always hitting one of those, or just like hitting a rock underneath or something and cutting your leg. So that's what I was like, oh, that's why, because you could get hurt with that. But really, the biggest problem with a slip and slide is that adults, especially, because like the heavier and the bigger a person is, they can accelerate so fast, right? But then they also, I don't know if you remember going on the slip and slide, like if it's not totally wet, you can kind of come to a complete stop, like very abruptly. And it could cause serious neck injuries, and it caused paralysis in some people. Like, it's crazy. It could even kill you in theory. It could break your neck. So that's something I didn't even really think about as a kid, that you would have. It would almost be like a severe form of whiplash in a way, that you're going so fast and stop and your head jolts back like that. Other ones that were in there, the jarts.
What is a jart?
It's like a
Talk
a
about
dart.
A horrible name.
It's a dart, like a dart you would throw at a dartboard, but it's huge to throw outside. And instead of it, I mean, you could get hurt with a dart too. But the jart had this thick metal, heavy, like stick hanging out of the bottom of it that when you threw it, I guess it could go and like go into the dirt. I don't know what you were supposed to throw it at. I think it was a game of some sort, kind of like horseshoes or something, like a game that you were throw these things. And in 1987, these kids were playing outside, and this boy, a little kid, threw it, and it went over the fence and hit his sister in the head, and it killed her. So but when you look at a picture of the thing, you're like, yeah, of course that was going to hurt somebody, especially because you're telling kids to throw them. So, but people still have them in their garage and stuff, which is kind of cool. But
well, are those going to be sold for $16,000 next at auction? Well, speaking of another dangerous science kit, there was in the 2000s, so recently, when we have all this information about dangerous substances, they were selling this CSI fingerprinting kit, and that had asbestos in it.
Yeah, which I don't understand why, but think about like when you're doing fingerprints, it's like you're using loose powder or blush, right, with a brush, and you're kind of brushing over where you're looking for fingerprints. So all you're doing is just creating dust that little kids are breathing in. Like asbestos can damage your lungs, and it could eventually lead to a certain kind of cancer. Like I think if let's say, for example, you had it when you were a little kid and you played with it once, you'll be fine. It's more like chronic exposure. That's why people that work with asbestos are more likely to get uh, damage to their lungs and mesothelioma because of asbestos exposure. But one time isn't going to kill you, but also why expose a kid to it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I was most surprised when we were writing this up that they said some of the most common injuries are from motorized scooters and
Oh
skateboards,
yeah. Yeah,
and they're the most common gift.
yeah, they're the most common injuries that are seen in emergency rooms and stuff from falling off of those things for sure, and bikes.
Well, I think when you get one as a little kid, you're just stoked and you have, no coordination at all. So you just go crazy and the thing's on wheels. Like I could now as an adult ride a non-motorized one fine, but even if I get on the motorized ones that they have in certain cities and stuff, I'm like, forget it. I
Oh,
can't
they're
even do
so
this.
bad because they go so fast. They can go really, really fast. And who, like, I remember seeing them when I went to Miami, and it's like, all right, you're in downtown Miami. I don't carry a bike helmet with me everywhere, but I want to take this thing to get from here to here. Like, most people aren't wearing helmets with those things, and they go fast. You just will get seriously injured if you're going 15 or 20 miles an hour and you fall and hit your head. You're going to get seriously injured, you know?
Yeah, and I've ridden them a couple of times when I was in Knoxville last summer. I thought that was the best landscape for it because, University of Tennessee wasn't in session, so there was barely any people there. Their roads are actually really nice and smooth and there's not a lot of potholes and stuff. So that was a pleasurable experience. But the time I rode them before was in Santa Monica, which the roads are not good and there's lots of cracks and there's heavy traffic and it was very overwhelming, especially as somebody not experienced in riding anything like that. So that was very scary and I could very easily, I mean, I did fall off of it at one point, but I could see getting in a serious injury,
You know, one of
having a
the
serious
things on
injury.
those lists too is the Heelys sneakers.
Oh,
Remember
those
those?
were my shit when I was in
Yeah,
sixth grade.
Deanna broke her arm on my niece broke her arm on it. She was going up the steps and she fell backwards and she broke the head of her humerus with those skates.
Yeah, I mean, those popped up in middle school and went away so fast. My teachers were not having it. They were so pissed about all the
But
kids
I feel
scooting
like they're
around.
back.
They are back. I've been seeing them
It's
everywhere.
so that's speaking of because they determined that they were bad and got rid of them, I thought, and then they
I
came
don't think
back.
I don't think they were banned. I think they just went like they weren't cool anymore, so people stopped buying
Oh,
them.
because
They
I
were
was gonna say
expensive.
like another toy that's on our list is the magnets, those little
Mhm.
tiny magnets. So they were a big thing for a while, and then you couldn't buy them anymore. And then I was just looking on Amazon for something to buy for my nephew yesterday, and they're for sale again on there, these magnets. So I mean, obviously, if I get them for a kid that's 7 years old, they're fine. But if there's ever a baby around, that's where the danger occurs if a kid puts it in their mouth, you know?
Mhm.
um, which is scary because those magnets, like, let's say you swallow a couple of them and they're so, so strong, they stick pieces of the bowel together and they do the same exact thing. They cause an obstruction and, pretend you put magnets in something like, I don't even want to use a hose as an example because a hose has such a thick wall, not like the bowel does, but it sticks the pieces of it together and then the food can't move through it. And again, it's the same thing. It causes an obstruction and could cause a perforation and stuff. So they're really dangerous. And for some reason they were banned and now they're back. So I don't know what's up with that. We just like forget about things.
Yeah, and then I guess in the most of modern times, 2024, we have the Oculus. So the one case you had in the grocery room, this kid got this insane hive around his eye. And then I guess in other cases, people are wearing them and just bumping into their surroundings and falling and just totally not paying attention.
Yeah. So just to read that post to just get it's a lot more of the toys are like things back in the day, which you just can't like, you can't imagine a father like lowering their daughter down to get their son out of a hole in the wall. So it's the same thing here. It's just kind of nuts.
Listen, Pop Up realistically was going to be like, I will do anything possible not to have 911. He is so
Oh,
anti,
he
like,
is.
going to the hospital, calling anyone for help, let alone having emergency workers there. Forget it. He would be so embarrassed if somebody had to come to the house.
Well, one time he was installing cabinets in the house and holding the cabinets by himself over his head, and he dropped it and it hit the corner, like hit his head. And he came in my room with his hands on his head and he was gushing blood. And I could see his frontal bone because it was a giant skin flap, a huge laceration, right? Partial like avulsion injury. And he's just, and my mom wasn't home. And I'm like a teenager and freaking out, like, oh, I'm going to call 911. Oh my God. And he's just like, don't like, turns around like, don't you dare. With like a monster voice, because like his biggest fear ever is an ambulance coming to our house and him getting embarrassed, so.
God forbid an ambulance comes to help you when your whole forehead's bleeding everywhere.
Yeah. And so we brought him he ended up getting a lot of stitches, over 20, I think, on his forehead. And it was an upside down horseshoe, which was hilarious. But yeah, it was fine. Heads bleed a lot, so it just looks worse than it is. It definitely wasn't 911 worthy, but like I saw all that blood and just like.
All right, this next case is this like high profile true crime case. We never heard of it until this week.
Yeah, we wrote this up this week for our high profile death dissection 2 parts. Usually we split them in 2 parts if they're really. We don't want people to get bored reading so many words sometimes, so we split them up if they're a lot of information.
So basically what happened was this guy and his wife were getting a divorce. It seemed like there was maybe some financial issues the guy was having. He also had a son that he kept a secret that he had abandoned because the kid had some brain injury. And then when the wife found out about it, she obviously was not cool with it.
The kid apparently got hurt in a swimming pool when the kid was little. And either drowned, partially drowned, whatever, and had permanent brain damage. And then the guy was like, yeah, peace. I don't want anything to do with this kid anymore.
So didn't want anything to do with the kid anymore, but still claimed him as a dependent on his taxes for 7 years.
Yeah.
Because that's something normal to do. So only like a year and a half into their marriage, the wife finds all of this out. And, how do you get past something like that?
I don't know, because that's outrageous. Could you imagine like something? So I would be like, so wait a second. So you have a kid and I didn't know about this kid. And not only that, you went through this traumatic thing that your child got injured to the point where they're brain damaged and stuff. And now you like skipped out. I don't know. I feel like that's grounds for divorce.
Yeah. And she had a couple of children. So obviously you want to know that the person you're marrying is going to be good to your children. And how does that happen if they have a past like this?
Yeah.
But anyway, they go to get divorced and she wants spousal support, and then he got fired from his job for fraudulently billing for hours he wasn't working to his clients. And then apparently they had saved like $88,000 in their brief marriage together as like a nest egg. And then he dwindled it down to 17 grand. So not only is the whole son thing happening, but then there's this financial component too. So right before Christmas, I think it was actually, this is coming out December 19th. So December 18th, 2008. Their divorce gets finalized. And then on Christmas Eve that year, only a couple days later, he shows up to her family's Christmas party at their house dressed as Santa Claus. And when this 8-year-old opens the door, he shoots her in the face.
Yeah, it's so outrageous. And he came also with a package with a bow on it, which ended up being this air compressor that he tried to turn into a spray device to spray racing fuel all over the house as well.
Yeah, so when the doors first open by her 8-year-old niece, he shoots her and then just starts like opening fire into the house. He's like clipping all these adults. It was late at night. What was it, around 11:30 at night?
Yeah.
So a bunch of people were at the front of the house because they were getting ready to go home. So of course they fell victim just because they were in this part of the house. And then luckily a bunch of the kids were in the back of the house or outside. So they were able to get to safety in some capacity. But after he ran out of ammunition, then he starts spraying this fuel all over the house. He doesn't know this because this wasn't part of his plan. There's an open flame somewhere in the house. So the house just goes up immediately. The thing explodes. And then he ends up catching on fire too.
And he's wearing like a Santa suit is the shittiest fabric ever. It's like rayon velvet. It's so flammable. So the suit catches on fire and actually starts melting into his skin. So he gets serious, like, second and third degree burns all over his hands and arms at the time too. So
Yeah, so the house is completely engulfed in flames. He leaves the scene. 9 people die in the house out of, they said 25 to 30 people were in attendance at this party. So he kills a bunch of the family members. Then he drives to his brother's house, which was about 40 miles away, and then ends up shooting himself.
yeah. So he kills himself. He was probably they weren't sure if he was planning on doing that anyway because he didn't leave a note, but only in like 25% of cases of suicide someone actually leaves a note. So that's just, if someone doesn't leave a note, that doesn't mean that they weren't planning it. But he had bought plane tickets to escape to go to another state. So from that theory, they probably think that he was not initially planning on killing himself. But then when they did the autopsy, they saw how severe these burns were on his arms, and that would suggest that maybe he was in so much pain. Didn't Obviously he didn't go and get treatment because he couldn't get treatment and not explain where he got those kinds of burns from. So he was in. I mean, think about how much pain you're in when you get burned with the curling iron. Like, really, it's just the worst feeling in the world. And just imagine having it on your hands and arms and not getting treatment. Like, maybe he just didn't want to be on the run anymore and he decided he was going to get in trouble and just offed himself because of that.
Yeah, so what we're going to cover coming up this Monday is that there was 2 rental cars he had. They were booby trapped and the investigation was just insane. So,
Yeah, and it's an interesting from a forensic standpoint because they initially only found 8 bodies, and because the house was completely burned up, so they knew that there was 9 people that weren't accounted for. They found 8 bodies, and then a couple days later they found the ninth body, and then they weren't able to identify all of them right away, so they were only able to identify, I think, 6 of them at first, and then the other 3 they had to identify by either pulling their dental records or their old medical records. So if you have a body that can't be identified, and that means like you can't see a tattoo, you can't see their facial features, there's nothing on them that like screams that it's them, they're not just going to assume that it's a person. So they'll go to your dentist and they'll say, hey, can I have the missing person's dental records? And then they'll take x-rays of the dead body and then they'll confirm. They could do it with dental records or they could do it with x-rays, like if you ever broke your arm or something like that. So, and my dentist actually said that he's been practicing for a long time. And he's like, in the entire time I've been practicing, I've only had the medical examiner call me once for dental records to identify a
wow.
body. Yeah, he was telling me about it. It was pretty cool. I mean, not cool for the person, obviously, but he knew who it was. It was like one of his patients and stuff, you know? So that ended up happening in this case, that they had to identify 3 of the bodies, one of them actually being the ex-wife because she was so charred. And when they did the autopsies on all of the bodies, they said that all of them had gunshot wounds. And some of them, and this is kind of cool too from a forensic perspective, that some of them died as a result of their gunshot wound and some of them died from the fire. And the way that you could tell that is that you open the trachea and the lungs and you could see if there's soot in the lungs. That means that they were alive and breathing at the time while the fire was burning. So if he came in and like shot someone and they died right then and there before the fire even happened, they wouldn't have any soot in their lungs.
And the craziest part of the story is the 8-year-old that was shot in the face at the door survived.
Yeah. And now she's older and she talks about it, which she's actually an advocate for gun violence now, which is cool. She's in her 20s, right?
Yeah.
But she's on Instagram and she goes to all these events and stuff. And yeah, I mean, I can't even imagine. Not only did she get shot in the face as a child, which is terrible, but her grandparents got killed, her aunts and uncles, like traumatic, and like seeing everybody run out knowing they burned to death. I mean, like that's some shit, man, for real.
Yeah. Well, let's end on a lighter note, which is this article you wrote called Recipes from the Grave. So this is one TikTok trend I could really get behind. This girl went to cemeteries and went around the people's gravestones, took recipes that they had etched on the gravestones, and then baked them.
Yeah, I love this. So in the photo, there's a recipe for sugar cookie, for the, what are they called? spritz or whatever.
Oh, the Spritz
The
cookies?
spritz cookies, that they're the ones that are specific to go in the gun, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a recipe for that, how to make those cookies, and they are kind of the best. They're like one of the best ones to have.
Yeah.
So I never even thought of that people put like their favorite recipe on their tombstone, which is so cool. And honestly, like I hope she would make a cookbook out of it. I just think it sounds awesome.
I think it's really cool. I believe like a full year ago, somebody asked us if we'd want to be cremated or buried or what. And while I firmly believe I want to be cremated, I also now like this is such a cool idea that I could
Well,
see myself
you
doing
can get
this.
cremated and then like my grandparents got cremated and then have tombstones. They got their remains buried.
What if, my pound cake recipe that everybody wants so badly, I'm like, you have to wait till I die
You
because
you can't because that's not even your recipe. That's like our grandparents' recipe, and they specifically did not want it to be
no, I know.
given up. So you can't do that. That's not cool.
So she was asked if she would engrave on her own recipe on her own gravestone. So she said she was torn between including mac and cheese or clam linguine. So I guess
Ooh, I love
everybody.
clam linguine. I would like to know that recipe.
So do you have one that you would put on there then?
God, I don't know. I can't say like which one would be. That's like so hard to say. Like what dish represents me as a person. Like would it be a dessert? Would it be this? Although everybody does love my whipped ricotta. That is
so
what
good.
I bring to all of my parties, but it's not my recipe, so that would be kind of cheating.
Well, you have to like I think you need to take recipes to learn how to make something and then evolve it over time to make it your own.
Yeah, you know what though? The thing is like it's a good recipe that I got online and it doesn't need to be altered. I mean, I do use that special gluten-free bread and I I burn it and things like that, but you don't need to mess with certain things. Like I can't imagine how you can make that better. You know what I mean? Like, but I don't have like I love cooking and I think I cook well, but I cook well because I can read directions and I find good recipes and I cook them. If you told me to go in the kitchen and whip something up, like I can't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
just everybody's different.
It's not like when I decorate my house, it's like I see visions in my head and they come out and I could have them come out with art or with like the kids' projects. Like I have visions like that I could execute. With cooking, I don't really know how to do that. If that makes any sense.
No, it does, because I watch that show Chopped a lot, which is like, they get a basket of mystery items and they have to come up with a dish, and they're always super weird things that you wouldn't normally have. I think like my husband would be really good at that show. He can just walk around the kitchen, find really random things and come up with a great dish. I'm more like, I have chicken, I have taco sauce, I have tortillas. Great. Like I'm kind of closed-minded in that way.
Yeah, but I do cook with like lots of crazy stuff, and when I put it together, it's good. But a lot of times I'm just like, how would you even know to do this and this, all of these steps and everything? Like I just wouldn't even know how to do it. So I guess some people have that with other aspects of their life too. Maybe I'll get better as I get more experience and stuff, but I'm just more of a find good recipe, read it, cook it kind of gal.
Well, you guys should let us know what recipe you would put on your tombstone if you had to, because I think it's really defining trait of everybody what their signature dish could be. So I think it's a really cool thing that people do.
I do too, for sure.
Yeah, and that girl definitely should make a cookbook. I think especially people like that listen to our show or other true crime shows would be super into it.
Yeah, that would be like a cool coffee table book.
But is it considered,
you can thank me at the end for the idea. No, because it's just, you're just the curator of it.
And whoever writes the movie about the Santa sarcophagus reinstating Christmas magic can thank me for that. All right. Well, thank you guys so much. We hope you have a great weekend. We will see you next week with some more news stories that you could have great discussions at the Christmas table about. So.
And we don't even know what it is yet because the news hasn't even happened yet. So stay tuned.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to Mother Knows Death. As a reminder, my training is as a pathologist assistant. I have a master's level education and specialize in anatomy and pathology education. I am not a doctor and I have not diagnosed or treated anyone, dead or alive, without the assistance of a licensed medical doctor. This show, my website, and social media accounts are designed to educate and inform people based on my experience working in pathology so they can make healthier decisions regarding their life and well-being. Always remember that science is changing every day and the opinions expressed in this episode are based on my knowledge of those subjects at the time of publication. If you are having a medical problem, have a medical question, or are having a medical emergency, please contact your physician or visit an urgent care center, emergency room, or hospital. Please rate, review, and subscribe to Mother Knows Death on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks.